With the Lord of the Rings TV series subtitled The Rings of Power recently starting, sometimes it is not hard to look back fondly at the film trilogy directed by Peter Jackson, adapted from Tolkien's famous books that was released from 2001 to 2003. Of course, as with any big IP, there is bound to be at least one licensed video game, except there wasn't one based on the first film of the trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring. Vivendi were in partnership with Tolkien Enterprises to focus on adapting at least the first book, but EA chose to adapt the films, specifically starting with the second one titled The Two Towers. Members of EA Redwood Shores and developers Stormfront Studios went to the film sets in New Zealand for a week and also kept in touch with the production team, who also provided, amongst the aesthetics and sounds, rough cuts of the film. This game was released some weeks before the premiere of the second film, so it could be a sneak peek. But was it at least a good game? Let's find out. My precious. Despite the game being titled The Two Towers, nearly half of the game actually is adapted from the first film, The Fellowship of the Ring, specifically its battle scenes. All of the missions in the game are battle scenarios accompanied by the story of the quest to destroy the One Ring. The Dark Lord Sauron forged this ring for the purpose of conquering Middle-earth, only he was barely thwarted by an alliance of elves and men. One of the men, Isildur, is corrupted by the ring and so cannot destroy it, allowing Sauron to gradually return. Aragorn, one of the playable characters, is Isildur's heir, and he and the other playable characters, the elf Legolas and the dwarf Gimli, and more of a fellowship who are barely present in the game, vow to aid a hobbit of the Shire named Frodo in covertly destroying the ring at the fires of Mount Doom. In a manner of storytelling different to the book and film, it is mostly presented as a flashback as Aragorn tells the story to Éowyn before the enemy arrive at Helm's Deep.
To destroy the world of men.
This is an action game, so don't expect it to carry much of the themes or even memorable dialogue from the films. Even more of the backstory and general plots are outlined in the manual. While it is nice to add out the battle scenes from the first film, namely the last alliance from the prologue, the battle on Weathertop, where you only play as Aragorn, and especially Balin's Tomb, there is too much of the first film. Retrospectively, it is interesting how little of the second film this game gives away, including what would happen to the characters and who would live or die. Most of the battles that would take place in the second film are either not present, heavily altered, or give a sneak peek, especially the epic battling at Helm's Deep. Epic would be one word to describe the production values, specifically for the time of the game's release. The game does feature excerpts from the first two films, with the sneak peeks of the second film being retrospectively tantalizing. These excerpts do transition to the in-game graphics, and it is through this technique you can't help noticing the game could have looked better. The characters do vaguely resemble their film counterparts, but the animation is very effective, given that Viggo Mortensen, who plays Aragorn, and the sword master Bob Anderson came to the studio to perform the sword fighting. The environments look very faithful due to the art direction, though the texture and lighting work leaves something to be desired. The sound, however, is generally great. Howard Shore's exceptional music score is featured under the full copyright and definitely adds to the action, complete with the sound effects. Dialogue, including excerpts from the films, are mostly done by the main cast, who, save for some repetitive lines spoken in gameplay, mostly do a good job. The less said of the random side character lines, the better.
Our only hope is to stand together! Saruman's forces move strange explosive devices through this town. Help us destroy them.
But surely, we haven't started playing this game to watch a film, we want to play as the characters, and use our weapons to destroy orcs, goblins, trolls, basically any grim enemy who wants to aid Sauron in conquering Middle-earth. It is a generally fast-paced hack-and-slash game, where you use a mixture of quick and fierce melee attacks, plus ranged attacks, which you have to use a mixture of to defeat foes of varying armor builds. You can also dodge and parry attacks. It is in the prologue level with Isildur you learn these controls, and you will mash these buttons a lot, to the point where it can get tiring and repetitive, especially with the combos, more on that later. The missions are battle scenarios which mostly culminate in you beating a boss, such as the Watcher outside the Mines of Moria, and the Cave Troll in Balin's Tomb. Most of them have some equivalent of a time limit. We have to defend structures, or characters, consisting of either the main cast or random town inhabitants, from the enemy. It is here you may find the missions a little more frustrating than they ought to be. For one thing, the camera is very awkward. The levels are linear, but the camera shifts perspective and sometimes the direction you have to move the stick in. It is also sometimes hard to know what paths can be walked on. Add to this inconsistent loading times, perhaps more so on the PlayStation 2 version that has been shown in this review, that can make one impatient to retry levels should the playable character die or the time limit reaches conclusion. Still, the combat while repetitive can be fun, and the bosses are challenging and fair. Except for one. That one whole mission is centered around. It is a fierce warg rider whose battle is tedious and arbitrary in its design. The warg can run over your character and cannot be hurt by any of your attacks. So it just removes a chunk of your health. You have to wait for it to taunt, then do a quick attack to stun it and drain as much of its health as possible. But you have to wait for this enemy to taunt, which can take well over a minute or two, especially when it sends out 1 or 2 low-tier warg riders, who can be easily dispatched for health and ammo refills, but still. Sorry for the bad there, but figuring out this boss's weakness and waiting for it to appear was not fun or well designed. So, is this game a challenge, then? Well, it certainly can be, but what can help is upgrading your characters and purchasing stats, weapons, and especially combos. How this works is partially dependent on the character selection. Aragorn has the most balanced melee attacks at the expense of speed and, to some extent, defense. Legolas is good at speed and plenty of ranged bow attacks, but has low defense. Gimli has the best defense, but his movement and powerful attacks are slow, almost like a tank. To upgrade any one of these characters, you have to be mostly good at getting enemies in the most efficient ways and while taking as little consecutive damage as possible. Anytime you kill an enemy, you get the following ratings from worst to best: fair, good, excellent, and perfect, the latter of which is a temporary status effect that increases strength and gives you perfect ratings for every enemy killed during that pattern. The more you get higher ratings, the more XP you get as well as a better mission rating. XP is spent on the aforementioned stats, weapons, and combos almost every time you level up. You can increase health for Gimli, get more powerful bows for Legolas, and get great sword attacks for Aragorn. It's up to you. Combos are especially necessary for getting through waves of enemies with good ratings, especially for getting even more perfects, but sometimes the button patterns are hard to pull off while enemies can overwhelm you, to the point of not being able to see where you are. Now, before you RPG fans get excited, you can only level up each character to level 10, which means this is not a long game. One run through of a game as one of the 3 main characters lasts close to 5 or 6 hours, regardless of how much frustration you get through with the time limits and overwhelming enemies. Sure, you can go back to previous levels for the sake of it, maybe get a better mission rating, get more XP yet again, and even level up the other 2 characters. Completing specific missions and leveling up each of the 3 characters leads to secrets such as videos about the game, visible on a tantalizing mission map, which also vaguely shows other secrets beyond the ending. But it is really up to you if you can get past the tedium, frustration, linearity, and repetitive action to go through as much of the game's content as possible. Despite all the ranting here, The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is still a solid game at its core, and retrospectively a great sneak peek at the memorable action scenes from the films. All of the missions, save for that warg boss one, are mostly well designed and understandable in how to progress, while you hack and slash away at enemies. But that's mostly all the game is, and those wanting more, especially from the Tolkien license or films in regards to fantasy RPGs and adventures, may not enjoy the game. The production values were nice purely for 2002, and the gameplay is also not up to even the simple standards of the game's premise anyway, in regards to collision detection, clunkiness, and even at least one pretty bad glitch. Still, if you're into hack and slash games or the action scenes from the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, you may enjoy completing the game from start to finish if you stick with it. Of course, The Two Towers also had a Game Boy Advance version and a sequel based on the next film, but that's for another time.